Welcome everybody, welcome to the MITS YouTube channel. Today, the topic that we'll be tackling is Git and GitHub. I'm sure all of you might have heard about the topic in the internet a couple of times. Some might refer to it as an open source website, some might refer to it as a collaborative coding website, and I myself refer to it as both. So what I'd like to do today is introduce you guys to Git, GitHub essentials, and how to get started and have a good foundation in Git. So I believe you're all familiar with GitHub, but then again, I'll give you a quick introduction. So this is going to be an introduction on Git and GitHub once again. So let's get started without any further ado. So before all of that, I'd like to give you guys a story. So this is Ramesh. As you see, he's running away from something. So what happened was, it's a very funny idea. So what happened was, Ramesh was working on his computer. He forgot to save his files, and guess what happened? Lightning struck. So now what's the problem? His computer is not working. All the code that he had written so far is gone. It's completely gone. You can't use it anywhere. So that's a big problem that Ramesh is facing. And what I want to tell you is, you won't end up like Ramesh if you start using Git and GitHub. So again, today what we'll be talking is, what is a version control system? Git, who's that? What is a GitHub student plan? So we have a lot of free stuff at the end, so keep watching till the end to get all those goodies. So let's give Ramesh a skip ahead and let's get into the topic. So about the session. So today what we'll be talking about is workflows in Git, how Git helps you save your projects and help them upload it on sites like GitHub or other version control websites. Remote repositories like GitHub, which I just explained. And if you guys are interested, I'll give you a basic Git installation and setup starter guide. You can just look at that and do it very easily. And we'll also discuss through the basic commands. And again, watch till the end to get goodies and free stuff. Okay, let's start with GitHub workflow and what VCS, that is version control system, and Git is. So before I just show you the slides, what I'd like to say is, so the fun fact about Git is that it is a side project used to maintain Linux. So I believe you're all familiar with the person who made Linux, who is Linus Torvalds. So Linus actually made Linux as a hobby project. So he wanted to do something in his life. So that's why he made Linux. So the problem was, as Linux was growing bigger, a lot of people wanted to contribute and a lot of people wanted to collaborate. But it was getting harder and harder to share the code. So what would a wise man do? Gradually, what he'll do is make another software to help him create his own software. So that's the basic humble origins of Git. And from that point onwards, there have been a lot of version control systems, such as things by Microsoft and like Oracle. But the main industry standard is Git. So that's what we'll be discussing today as well. So without further ado, let's get into the Git workflow. So what I'd like you to think is of Git is like a folder. So basically, Git is like a person who is like a personal assistant for you, who will manage your folder. So let's start by discussing what, I'll give you some terminologies. Don't worry about the fourth one that I just removed. I'll come to that later. So let's start by discussing what a working directory is. So I'm pretty sure all of you have done projects and all of you are planning to do projects. So, and I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the concept of a folder. So a folder is basically a place in a computer where you store all the files related to a project or whatever that you're trying to do. So then again, what you'll be doing is, in the working directory is basically a folder. It's just another name that Git uses to refer to your folder. So that's what a working directory is. It's the folder where you work in. Simple as that. Now, when I come to what Git is, it's basically, now the main important thing will be staging area. So the staging area is basically the place where you review all your stuff. So as I said earlier, so consider Git as your personal sidekick who will help you keep track of all your files. So here, the staging area is the place where you, and once again, this is like a hypothetical thing that will make you understand easier. And so the staging area is basically a place where you review all your changes. So if you have made a change or made modifications from a previous save point, that's where you will see all the changes. And that's where you see, so the staging area is a place where you see all the changes that you have made before you save them. Okay. And now the local repository. So the term repo or repository is something that you'll be hearing a lot, and what it basically is like a log book. So like it is a log book where you write in all the changes that you made. So it might be like, yeah, I've changed the file and I've added a new file, or maybe created change in line 32 of another file. So this is basically a logbook, and that's what people in Git call it as a repo. So usually what we work with is have a local repo. So that's what I'm written here is like a local repo, that is a repository on your computer. Again, to simplify, it is a logbook that stores all the changes that you have made. So it's like a version control. That's why Git has a name, VCS, version control system. So those are the main three things that you have to keep in your mind is working directory, staging area, and local repository. And to summarize what I've just said, the working directory is the folder where you work in. Pretty simple. Staging area is the place where you review all your changes. You stage the changes and you check, so okay, if you want to save or not. And once you've saved or made any modifications, the local repository is what keeps a record of it. That's very easy. Okay, so now you've understood the basic concept of Git and how it manages your versions. And now I'd like to introduce you to something known as a remote repository. So a remote repository is basically a local repository on a remote computer. That's pretty much it. So there are many remote repository providers like Atlassian or Gitti, which you can host yourself, and the most famous one that you probably heard of is GitHub. So now I believe, so basically what happens here is it is like a copy of your logbook but online. So what are the obvious benefits there? You can share these things with your friends. So you can have a collaborative coding experience. You can share your code with the internet publicly. So that's a term known as open source. So that's a very big phenomenon, and a lot of companies who are working in open source have a lot of tools which a lot of people can contribute into. So that's also what GitHub allows you to do, and again it can act as a save point. So in the case of Ramesh, to go look back, if Ramesh had did a proper repository and a remote repository, he wouldn't have an issue if his computer got struck by lightning. So yeah, that's what GitHub is. And if you are interested, this is the Wikipedia definition of GitHub. It's not really anything. It's like, so again, GitHub is an internet hosting service for software development, version control using Git. It provides distributed version control plus access to control, bug tracking, software features, task management, continuous integrations, and wiki for every project. It may seem like a lot, but basically GitHub provides you a lot more customizations and a lot more features which are useful for all kinds of developers, and again, stick till the end, because GitHub loves students, and it gives you a lot of free things and a lot of goodies to work with. Yeah, so that's the basic of what Git and GitHub is. Now what I want to do is, if you are following along, I'd like you guys to follow along by installing Git. So this is a simple cheat sheet of how and when you can install Git on your device, respective of your operating system. And if your operating system is not mentioned here, feel free to Google it. It should be very simple to install, and these are very simple steps you can do. So first of all, I'd like you all to make a GitHub account if you're not, because that's also a very valuable thing during your interviews or preparations in software interviews, because GitHub is basically what shows you that you've done work. So GitHub is like a profile wherein you keep track of all the changes that you've made. So again, I would recommend you guys follow along if you're willing to do that. And here are the few steps and to get Git running on your computer. Okay, now let's get a bit more technical and look at the basic commands of Git. It's command line time. Okay, so these are some Git commands, basic Git commands that you have to ponder over. So let's get started by the most important and the commands that you'll be using the most: git add and git commit. So what are these commands? So again, there are a lot of alternatives. I'm just describing how to use the command line version. I'll recommend you guys use the GitHub desktop if you're not comfortable with the command line version, because the GitHub desktop is very easy to use. It is very simple and it gives you intuitive directions on how to clone a repository or do all the things that I mentioned here on the desktop. But then again, command line gives you a lot more flexibility and it helps you easily do the stuff faster than GitHub desktop. So let's start by the main two commands. The most frequent commands that you'll be using will be git add and git commit. So git add. So what do you mean by that? So as I mentioned earlier, there are three main important things in your GitHub workflow, which will be the working directory, the staging area, and your local repository. So the process of transitioning your files between the working directory to the staging area and then to the local repository is done by these two commands, git add and git commit. So git add is the command that helps you specify the files that you want to get into staging. So basically the files that you want to review before saving. So git add, the syntax for the command would be git add and the list of the files or the pattern that you want the files to be matched with. So you can use that command to stage them. So say for example, if I made a website with an HTML page and I've added a new file called CSS to have styling on that website. So what now I will do will be, I'll use the command git add CSS to add that file for review. Now when I ask git for status, which we'll cover later, it will show that I have staged the file CSS for review, and for later on I can save that file or make modifications and then commit that save to the repository. So as you might have guessed, the other command to save the staging file changes to the repository would be git commit. The command git commit along with a message will be used to save these logs. So again, as the analogy that I used earlier, what you can do is basically is like writing a new record in your logbook. So that's what the command git commit does. It basically writes a new log record into your logbook. So the syntax for git commit would be git commit minus m and whatever the message you want. And then again, I am not enforcing you guys to learn the syntax here. There are plenty of online resources you can find in the description or search it on the internet, where you can find all the resources for these commands and all the proper syntax associated with them. Okay. Now we learned about the commands git add and git commit, which help you review your changes and save these changes to the repository. Without further ado, let's look at two more commands, git branch and git merge. So let me tell you a story. So say for example, Rakesh and me are working on a project together. So if Rakesh wants to add a new feature, what will he do? So he's pretty sure that the feature if he's trying to develop might crash the entire project. So obviously he can't work on the main project file, right? So what do you do when you're not sure that you will make mistakes on the main thing? What you usually do is make a copy. So similarly, Git allows you to do the same with project. So consider your Git project as a timeline. So in this timeline, basically what happens is all the saves that you make appear on this timeline as points. Now, Git branching is the concept wherein you make a copy of this timeline at a given point. And what do you mean by making a copy? It is basically replicating all the files at that current position into a different track. So basically there will be two lines which can be easily illustrated by the example that is shown here. So here the blue line represents the main feature that everybody in the company is working on. The new purple little feature is the one that is Rakesh working on, and further along the line the green feature is maybe another feature worked upon by someone else, maybe Alice. So git branch and git merge are the commands that let you do this kind of stuff. That is, create branches, basically copies of timelines where you can work carelessly or like without fear on projects or features that you want to implement. And when you're done with creating those features, you can use the merge command to merge these timelines back into the same one. So this is a very simple concept, but in day-to-day use, this has become very useful, and I would like you guys to try it out for yourself. And with that, we've completed 4 basic commands of Git. Now, we've completed 4 basic commands in Git. What do we do next? let's learn 4 more. Why not? So now the 4 commands that I'm going to teach you are git status log, clone, pull, pull and push. So let's look at the first two, git status and git log, and then the command git clone. So basically, what do you mean by status and log? They're pretty self-explanatory. Git status is the command that you use to check the status of your repository. That is, as I mentioned earlier, when you put files into the staging directory, you can use the git status command to see what files are staged. That is, what all changes have been made, what all files have been staged for saving later, and you can look through all of that using the git status command. And obviously, git log would be checking the logs. As I mentioned earlier, you can consider git as a timeline with all the changes that you made as points on that timeline. So basically, what the git log command helps you to do is basically see all the points in the timeline. Now, before going further, I'd also like to brush upon the git clone command. This is basically, so as we mentioned earlier, if Rakesh would have made a copy of his files on a remote repository, he would have saved it from the lightning strike, right? So what would Rakesh do after getting the new computer? Basically, what Rakesh would do is clone the remote repository onto his local computer. So that's why we use the command git clone to clone remote repositories onto our computers, given we have the permission to do so. Those are some 2 important commands that you might use day to day. But the most important commands that you might come across will be git push and git pull. So basically, as we discussed earlier, there is something known as a remote repository, whereas the repository is on a different place, on a different computer, where all the changes that you've made are being pushed into that repository. So you make these changes, that is, you transfer these changes from one repository to the other by making use of git push and git pull. So again, this is pretty self-explanatory, wherein git pull pulls the latest changes from the remote repository onto your computer, and git push vice versa does the same thing. It pushes all the local, like the latest changes that you made on your local repository onto the remote repository. So this is a simple infographic that shows you how git pull and push works. So basically, the remote repository, we usually call it origin for some reason, but the origin repository can be used to push changes into and pull changes from. So that's also a very simple explanation of git push and pull. And with that, we are done with the 8 basic commands in Git. Now, since you have reached the end of the video, let's look at some goodies that I want to give to you. So let's see what we have next. So it asks me to log out of PowerPoint and visit this URL. So education.github.com/packs/office. So basically, GitHub is a platform which is very much interested in the development of its community. So GitHub has grown to such a huge extent only by help from its community. The people who are using GitHub, the people who make changes to GitHub, and people who work with GitHub. So what I'd like you guys to see is basically, for all the students watching this video, GitHub offers a very good plan known as the education plan. So wherein the education plan is basically a initiative taken by GitHub to providing a lot of free services and things for students so that they can learn new concepts. So there is something known as campus experts. There are tools which are free provided by GitHub, and you can attend like a lot of sessions, workshops, and a lot of things that GitHub provides, a lot of resources and a lot of blog posts and a lot of things that GitHub provides which you can make use to learn and improve yourself. So I'd encourage again all of you guys to visit. So just to recap what these features might be. So let's look at what some of the offers that GitHub Student Plan offers. And if you guys are familiar with coding assistants like Copilot, so I'm happy to let you guys know that GitHub's education plan gives you Copilot for free. It gives you a lot of resources such as digital credits on cloud providers so that you can create your own cloud servers and experiment and try hacking yourself. Then it also gives you domains so that you can host your own websites. it gives you premium to a lot of services, so that you can make use of that in your workflow to improve yourself and become to the industry standard that companies expect you to be. And once again, GitHub student plan gives you all this for free. All you just need to have is your ID card and verify that, and that's all. So with that, we have come to the end of this session. Feel free to ask any queries about GitHub in the comments below, and check the description for all the links and tutorials or resources that we will share. And with that, thank you everybody and have a nice day.